It's the biggest acrylic sign I've been asked to make so far. So we won't be using the bolt. We're going to need the Nova Plus today on LaserNug. Welcome back. I'm pretty excited. A little nervous, but pretty excited. As you know, acrylics are very expensive, especially when you start to get into thicker and larger pieces. So there's a lot riding on this. I messed this acrylic up. I can't go back to the customer and tell them I need another 150 bucks. That's all on me. So I'm going to walk you through this build. It's probably going to be in multiple videos. I'm going to try to keep each video succinct or concise to that particular part of the build, because I know a lot of folks want to try acrylic. You're new to the Bolt or your Nova Plus, you're a little leery about attempting or trying to use acrylics because you've seen a number of different videos on YouTube that suggest that acrylics are difficult or finicky. They're actually not. Both machines will do an excellent high quality job of engraving and cutting acrylics. You don't need any type of gimmicks or band-aids. It just comes down to the same thing it will for every other material you try to work on. Settings. It's all in the settings and the work that you put into trying to refine those settings to get an excellent high quality product out of acrylic on either one of these lasers. So on today's video, I'm going to walk you through the big engrave I have to do in the back of this 2 foot by 3 foot black acrylic backer. While it's engraving, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about acrylics, maybe make you a little more comfortable with trying them. And I'll also explain to you how I came to determine that these were the right materials for this sign build for this customer. Let's do it. So let's talk about prep. Like any other tool you have in your shop or any other equipment you use up at the farm or the cottage or on your property, you have to maintain your equipment. This is a big build. In fact, the biggest I've ever done. So before I even attempt to put that acrylic into this Nova Plus, I'm going to maintain it. I maintain my lenses, mirrors, my greasing, my oiling, all those things regularly, but it's going to be a big engrave today on that backboard, and I don't want anything but the finest, highest performance out of my Nova Plus. So the first thing I did this morning over coffee is I re-cleaned my lens, all my mirrors. I cleaned and oiled or lubricated my X and Y rails, made sure my honeycomb was clean, and I made sure to calibrate my air and make sure I've got it set exactly where I need it for the engrave on acrylic. And because the engrave is going to be large, but it needs to be in a specific part, I'm going to be using my camera for my alignment on that sign today. Many of you have asked me what the point of having a camera in this big bed is. Well, today is a great example of why that camera comes in so handy so often. I'm going to peel the mask off of only one side of this acrylic. I'm going to leave the mask on the back because I want to make sure I try to keep it as protected as possible during the build and the assembly before it's ready to ship to the customer. Because of the sheer size of this sign, I thought it was better to make it a little thicker to give it a little more structure. So I've actually ordered a 3/8 inch piece of acrylic. It's pretty heavy, but it's nice and rigid. And I think the 1/4 might have been okay, but I just thought it's better to err on the side of caution. Make sure I've got a nice strong structure on the back of the sign because of the use of the application of the sign, which we'll talk about shortly. That is one big, beautiful, glossy black sheet of acrylic. I'm pretty excited. When you're ordering acrylic, you'll find that sometimes your supplier sends it with kind of a plastic protection layer on it. Far easier to remove than this paper-based, but I think the paper-based provides more protection in transport. It looks good. As you probably noticed already, acrylics attract lint and dust like crazy. It also picks up all of the oils in your fingers, fingerprints, all of those kind of things. All I want to do right now is I'm just going to check it to make sure there are no surface scratches. If there are, I'll return it back to my supplier and get a replacement piece because I want that to be perfect for the customer. No indentations, no defects. And we're good. Let me show you what we're working with today. Here in Lightburn, you'll see I've got a big messy file. But what you see front and center is the actual design that the customer signed off on. In this first part, what we're going to do is we're going to engrave this very large graphic, which is, I believe, around 19 inches by 14 inches on that 2 foot by 3 foot backboard or a piece of black acrylic. You'll see that I've used a tool layer here to outline my 2-foot by 3-foot board. However, if you look closely, you'll notice that 24 inches by 36 inches extends outside of my working area here in Lightburn. So you can't engrave or cut right to 36 inches or right to 24 inches. If you're on the bolt, the same thing. You can't cut or engrave at 20 inches out. It won't allow you to, because the laser head needs room to maneuver. And although your piece fits into your workbed, you can't laser right to the very edges. And that's why you'll see that the sign itself exceeds or extends over the actual workable area here in Lightburn. What we're doing with the sign, your green lettering, that's going to be cut out in different colors of acrylic. And this first step is we're going to take this large graphic and engrave it on the back of the 2x3. There's a number of different ways you could use, whether it's absolute coordinates, lining it up manually in the workbed, or you can use your camera to get this precise and exact positioning of this very large graphic to ensure that I don't engrave it in the wrong spot on this backboard. That's an expensive mistake. So I've colored this graphic a different layer color. I've already assigned my settings, which I've already tested to make sure it's going to work on a larger engrave area, because you may find sometimes that the engrave settings you have for small little graphics tend to start to show their faults when you expand that graphic into a much larger engrave. So I've done some testing, and I'll talk about that shortly in the video. But here are my settings that I've determined. I'm at 600, just over 600 lines per inch, 20% power, and 1,000 millimeters per second. No air, or low air in this case of the Nova Plus, and I'm in fill mode. Everything else looks good. We'll close that, it's confirmed. Let's jump into the laser and let's get this set up. I've dropped my Z table down for this very thick piece of material, and now we need to square it up before we go further. So we're very gently going to place it into our workbed. As I mentioned before, acrylics are beautiful, but they're very sensitive. The acrylics will not only pick up every piece of dust, but it also scratches very, very easily. When you're using the camera, you need to autofocus first before you begin using your camera in Lightburn. But before I autofocus, I need to square up my piece. So I'm going to run my laser along the edge, and I'm going to line this up so that my piece of acrylic is completely parallel with this X gantry. Now that I have my piece perfectly squared up in the laser, now I'm going to do my autofocus. You always need to autofocus before you begin using your camera function. I'm just going to keep my laser out of the way. Now let's jump into Lightburn. You'll notice that I have yet to ungroup the picture. I have everything grouped together. Just take a quick look. There it is. Because I don't want to ungroup, even though I'm only going to be engraving this, I don't want to ungroup everything yet, because I need to make sure that my tool layer, or my 24 by 36 inch outline, is lined up exactly with my piece of acrylic. Let's run down over here to our camera control. We're going to update the overlay. Okay, there we have it. Oh, that's not good. I'm just going to turn off my overhead lights because I'm getting a big shine off of that acrylic. Let's turn off the fade. Boy, I did not count on that. Let's update the overlay again. There, now it's gone. Perfect. Okay, we'll fade the back. And now what I need to do is line up my... Holy jumping. That's hard to see on black. And it looks like I am completely lined up here already. Well, isn't that nice? Jeez. I didn't have to move it at all. My acrylic is in place. That was a total fluke. I'm only going to be engraving, which is why I've ungrouped it. So this should be my engrave layer. I'm going to turn it back to black because that's where my settings are. I'm going to take a look at what's going to be engraved. Great. Camera, as you know, will use absolute coordinates, so you can't touch your coordinates or change it back to user origin because I need that engraved to be exactly where the camera sees it. Everything looks good. It will know exactly where to go to engrave it. And I think we're all in good shape. Nova Plus is good. I'm ready. I have it on absolute coordinates. I just want to check my cuts and layers one more time to make sure I've got it exactly where I want it. It is. You want to double check everything. The only thing I'm going to be engraving is that excavator graphic. It says it's about an hour and 40 minutes. It's going to be a long engrave. I'm glad I cleaned everything. Nova Plus is set. Camera is set. Let's send the file. You see it's going to take a little bit longer than normal to load, but it's gone. Excellent. I know I'm being repetitive, but I'm hoping that that'll help it to sink in or help you to remember the steps. We're using camera control. When you're using your camera, your lid is always up when you're doing all of your alignment. I've already autofocused before I began using the camera. Everything's clean, air is checked. Before I do anything, I'm not going to hit the origin button here because we're using absolute coordinates. And as you know, in pretty much every other video I've done, you see me immediately hit the origin. I've already autofocused, so I'm going to pull up my file, press enter. I'm going to get my big, beautiful picture, and it looks exactly as it should. I can frame, but I can't push origin. Okay, let's frame it. That looks about right. Okay, time to throw caution to the wind. Wish me luck. Periodically throughout this engrave, I'm going to keep checking my air assist control to make sure that it's within that 0.4 to 0.6. You've probably noticed even on smaller engraves, sometimes you'll see the numbers jump depending on where the laser head is doing its job. And we're looking good right now, so I'll just check it every couple of minutes. Just take a look, make sure it's looking good for me. So let's talk about what I think is probably the most notorious issue dealing with acrylics that probably scares a lot of people away from trying to work with acrylics on their laser. I call it hazing. I think some people on YouTube will call it frosting, but what it's defined as is the effect that occurs when you try to engrave into that acrylic, and your settings, quite honestly, are not really refined or dialed in. During the engrave, you'll see it creates dust in the air, just like it does with plywoods or materials, leatherette. Whatever you're engraving, you'll have that dust floating around from the engrave as the laser goes through and continues to engrave your design. In the case of acrylics, if your settings are off, quite often you're heating that acrylic, which I think we all know is a type or a form of plastic. You're heating it up so much that the dust is hot when it lands on the surface area of the acrylic around your design, and it immediately melts itself back into the surface of the acrylic. When you're done your engrave, you've cut out your piece, you clean it all up and you take a look at it, and you see this haze or this frosting that surrounds your engrave on the surface area around it. You try to clean it again and again, but you can't get it off. It's permanent. But if it's happening on your clear acrylics, it's most likely happening on the other colors. It's just that clear is the most obvious. Black, it's pretty clear, you can see it. Some of the other colors, you can only see it on a certain angle. But at the end of the day, it just means that your settings are not dialed in yet. So, if you remember back in the early days when I started working with acrylics about a year or 3/4 ago, you may remember I used to mask or put paper mask on top of my acrylic when I was engraving. Over time, I stopped doing that because I realized that these are very high-performing lasers I have, and I started to realize as I got more experience working with settings on these lasers that it couldn't be the acrylic that's the problem. It's definitely not the laser that's the problem. It had to be my settings. So as I've mentioned many times in the past, whenever you're dealing with any type of material, always keep your offcuts or your scraps. If there's any reasonable usable area left, don't throw them out. Throw them in a pile, as I do here on the shelf, and you can use those scraps or those cutoffs when you have time to work on your settings or refining your settings on that type of material. Similarly, you want to do the same thing with acrylics. And I mean no disrespect to any other YouTube creators, but you're going to see a lot of videos on YouTube where folks are advocating that you need to take Dawn dish soap and smear it all over your acrylic, let it dry before you put it in the laser, then go wash it off. Some others are advocating that you spray the acrylic with WD-40 first. Others are suggesting you use a different laser spray. I can't remember the name of it, but you spray the acrylic with this special substance or laser spray, let it dry, and then you wash it off. All of these things, including putting paper mask on it, these are just band-aids. Your Nova Plus or your Bolt will do an excellent job of engraving and cutting acrylics. It just means you have to keep working on your settings. And as you'll see today, this is getting pretty messy in that laser. You're probably thinking I should have masked it or put that Dawn dish soap on there. But I'm going to show you today that if you just work on your settings, you're going to get a nice, clean, beautiful, crisp engrave out of acrylics without any type of assistance or prep or band-aids or gimmicks. The laser is capable of doing an excellent job. It just takes a little time to work on your settings. I also wanted to talk about the film or the protective film that comes on acrylics. When you order acrylics from any company, sometimes it's going to come with a paper film on it, as you see today, and quite often you're going to get kind of a cellophane or a transparent plastic film or protective film on top of your acrylic. If you're only cutting out letters or cutting out a design, you're not engraving, you're generally okay to leave that plastic film on, because what it does is it'll protect the surface of the acrylic until you've finished your assembly, and then you can peel it off and keep it nice and shiny. Some people have suggested that cutting through it will create harmful fumes. If you're concerned about that, then just peel it off. But the important thing is that you can't engrave through that plastic protective film. If your acrylic comes with a paper-based protective film, you can certainly leave that on, as I've done many times, as long as your settings are strong enough to engrave through that paper and to cut through that paper, because it's paper-based. It's kind of like putting paper mask on, it's just a little thicker. Generally now, the only time I ever leave that paper or plastic-based protective film on the acrylic is when I'm cutting out shapes or letters. That way it protects the acrylic until I'm ready to peel it all off after I've glued it. So let me take a minute or two just to explain to you why I'm using the materials I'm using and why I'm doing the build the way I am today. When you're working with a customer on whatever that design or that creation is, in this case it's a sign, it's kind of an exploratory discussion the first few phone calls. When you start the discussion, you've got a lot of ideas in your head. You know, am I going to do a plywood backer, maybe a mosaic or geometric backing, maybe add some acrylics in, perhaps I'll use 3M, maybe I'll use Starbond for my adhesives. Do I need a frame around it? Maybe I need to use MDO or acrylics. The customer's going to have a budget, so that's the first thing that kind of drives what you can and cannot do. But at the end of the day, it's all about what the application of the sign is. And in this case, it's an outdoor sign, it's not an indoor sign. So right there, I'm thinking, okay, plywood might be out. So you go a little further and you find out it's not a sign that's going up on the side of a building, perhaps under a soffit. It's going to be out by the driveway in the front, unprotected, facing the weather 365 days a year. So that kind of narrows down now the materials you're going to use. The second thing you find out in this case is that this business is way, way up northern Ontario, and they get some pretty severe winters. So I know now I have an unprotected sign, and it's going to be subjected to high humidity because they're surrounded by lakes up there, and they're subjected to very cold and severe winters. In fact, during the winter, they're going to drop below -40 degrees several times throughout that winter. And for you folks in the States, -40 degrees Celsius is the same as -40 degrees Fahrenheit. That's where the temperature ranges cross. So I know I've got inclement weather, severe weather, it's unprotected, it's out by the side of a road, and all of those factors narrow down what materials you could possibly use. Can't use plywoods, I can't use real woods because this customer has no interest in resealing or restaining real woods every few years. I can't use MDO because although some folks are under the impression MDO is waterproof, it's actually not waterproof. It's water resistant. But you leave that MDO out, sealed or not sealed, out in inclement weather or severe winters, it's not going to last long before it begins to deteriorate. So with those various factors in mind, the only logical solution to a good quality sign was a sign that was made all of acrylics. Acrylics, as you know, are UV resistant. They're outdoor and indoor type materials. They last and endure a very long time in the weather. Just going to drop that Z table down so I have enough room to move it. Boy. Oh. That is one messy looking engrave. Do you think I messed it up? Let's give her a cleanup. We're going to hit it with some air first. So before I start to wipe this in any way, I just want to try to get some of this excess material or dust off. Remember, acrylics are very sensitive and they scratch really easily. I'm going to take a microfiber cloth, not a cotton cloth. Microfiber is the best. Remember, your acrylics are going to attract all the dust or lint off of anything else. I'm going to just gently squirt a little bit of water, not that it's damp, just a little bit. And when I wipe, I'm going to wipe like this. I don't want to wipe the dust into the surface or in any way try to scratch it. So we'll just do gentle short wipes. Flip it around, maybe give it a tiny bit of a squirt. Oh boy. You guys were worried, weren't you? I bet you there was a few minutes there you were thinking I did something wrong here. Oh boy. Isn't that something? Wow. Wipe, wipe, wipe. Oh, jeez. Oh, I'm starting to like this. Let me get the rest here. Not bad so far. My last step, at least just for now, I like this Novus 1. It's specially made for cleaning acrylics. You never want to use a Windex or any type of a product that has ammonia or alcohol in it because it's going to streak. This is going to just give me one last little clean, and then I'm good to go before I begin assembling the rest of the sign. This time we're going to use a clean microfiber cloth. This stuff is great. You don't need a lot. You just give her a little spritz. That's it. And then again, we're just going to wipe in an upward fashion. And that's going to help us clean our engrave. Let's take a look at it. And there she is. I don't know about you, but I'm super happy with the turnout, the consistency of that engrave. It's the biggest engrave I've ever done on acrylic. No mask, no Dawn dish soap, no WD-40, no workarounds or band-aids. You'll notice there is not a single spot where there's any type of hazing. It's all in the settings. Thanks so much for sticking around. I hope you'll join me in part 2 as we continue the build. Have a wonderful week. Please be kind to each other, and I'll see you again right here. I'm Gord Potter, and you've been watching Laser Nug. Cheers.